doesn't matter in which way or how you think, but if you think it's going to change the world, there's going to be really two types of nations. There'll be AI consumers and there'll be AI creators. Like, we want to be the Toyota Camry engine of businesses. I think some jobs will go away. Yes, absolutely. That'd be silly to say otherwise. Do I think many jobs will evolve? Absolutely. Do I think many people will be exposed? I do.
Hey, it's Nathan Bush, or Bushy, joining you from the land of the Turrbal people here in Brisbane, Australia. There's lots of amazing AI tools out there, and the promise of AI is so huge, so enormous, and so exciting. And sometimes it's easy to think about it as the new Lamborghini or the new McLaren for business. But what if it was actually the secret weapon that made your business run like a Toyota Camry? That's the standard we're looking for here in today's chat. Today, I am joined by David Brudenell, who is the Executive Director at Decidr.AI. David's had a fascinating career journey, moving across fintech, e-commerce, and digital innovation, and even studied zoology. Who knows how all that fits together? But today, David takes us behind the scenes on Decidr.AI, which is pioneering Agentic AI as a business system. Its idea is to transform messy data from across a whole bunch of platforms, such as Shopify, Salesforce, Xero, into one agentic single source of truth. The idea being that this should be a system that connects all the data across your organization to help you make better decisions based on the goals that you're setting. Now, they are still in the early stages with the beta going out in October, but what they're showing so far is incredibly promising. For some clients, they've already achieved a 5% incremental revenue in just 8 weeks. But what I love about this solution is that it goes after the goals that you set it. So it goes after the results that you want, not what the software wants. So today, we will dive into the Decidr.AI technology. We talk about how businesses can move beyond using AI just for efficiency, but actually using it to enable growth. We talk about the future economy and the agentic economy and how David believes there will be 2 schools of both businesses and nations based on how we adopt AI technology. And there's plenty to learn in here for senior leaders who are in organizations and heading up the e-commerce function about what your role might be. Once AI becomes the decision maker, how do you make sure that you yourself remain valuable and leading the AI through the organization? So heaps to unpack today. Fascinating episode. Here's my chat with David Brudenell, Executive Director at Decidr. David, welcome to Add to Cart.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Awesome to have you here. It's a first for us. It's the first time we've had a zoologist on the podcast.
Oh, the good old university days. It still follows. What is zoology?
And here we are talking about AI. You've been in the field for a long time now. You haven't kind of just stumbled across it. I'm really keen, before we get into Decidr, just to hear a bit about your career journey and your career path from studying zoology all the way through to leading Decidr. How do you describe your career arc so far?
It didn't start in a zoo, that's for sure, Nathan. I would say, like, I have done a few things consistently over the last 25 years. So thing number 1 is to look at challenges in frontier technology. Number 2 is always explore things that are intellectually challenging, which for me is not that hard. We know number 1 and number 2 are linked together. And number 3 is a goal I set for myself in university, which was I wanted to travel the world and I wanted a business to pay for it. And those 3 things, when combined together, there's many more that I've, added as I become more mature and more experienced as a professional. Yes. But those are the 3 things that continue to pull through my career. So yeah, that would be that part of the answer.
I like number 3. I'm detecting an accent, obviously. So how long have you been on the Australian soil?
Yeah, you detect my amazing Australian accent. I've been in Australia since 2003. So I'm coming up to 25 years. So almost like I'm at the halfway point between, my Canadian upbringing and my Australian upbringing, as I like to say. And, I had a 5-year stint in the States, during that 25 years or so. But yeah, Canadian born and Aussie bred, as I like to say.
Pretty much the same country, right?
Different
climate.
They're extremely similar. Outside of the climate, like same multi-party government system, universal healthcare, great people, Commonwealth country, love sport. Aussies like to go in thawed water. Canadians like to play on frozen water. Like there's a lot of similarities. I love it.
Now, we're not here to talk about geography. We are here to talk about Decidr and AI. And I was really interested when I started doing a bit of research around Decidr. It came on my radar a little while ago. And I love around the claim that Decidr is to be your go-to decision system for teams everywhere. I love that line. Like, that's a really big promise. What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Well, first of all is many people don't have enough time to make decisions, or you're focused on the less important decisions. The decisions that we think people should be focused on are the aspirations and the goals of your company, what your product should be, who your customer ICPs are, and those types of things. Unfortunately, many of the decisions we have to make are, can I afford to hire that additional person? Do I have to do this accounting and bookkeeping on a Saturday morning? The baloney, as I like to call it, the baloney. So in a world where, we have this amazing new technology called artificial intelligence or generative AI that has all of the knowledge of humanity at your fingertips now. And when people, when I say we, I mean like the royal we here. So as we begin to start to learn how to use this technology, we believe at Decidr, when used properly, and we can dive a bit more deeply into like what that means, is we can start to get rid of the baloney and elevate teams to what we call higher order work. And that is, making those what we think are the more important decisions as a business runs. The example I love to give is that I'm sure there is a metric within Toyota of how many times the bonnet is opened in one of the Camrys, right? And that goal target is 0, right? Because who thinks about, maintenance of a Camry engine? Nobody. Right? Because they're so reliable. When cars were first invented, yes, we had to go underneath the bonnet and fix it and crank it and do all kinds of those things. That's what we're doing that's what we're doing with businesses today. We're literally like in the bonnet, we're cranking the engine, we're doing all those things. But with a system like Decidr, we want to be the Toyota Camry engine of businesses, like of business.
I've never heard someone so aspirationally wanting to be a Camry.
I know. Isn't it the worst?
But I get it.
But you get it, right? So no one cares. But you know what you're doing when you're in your Camry? You're taking the people who mean most in your life, you're taking them safely, you're going on journeys, you're experiencing life, all the great things of every car commercial that's ever been made, right? That's what you're doing. And we're today in businesses, we're doing all the mechanic work and we're not driving the cars. So that's what we believe Decidr can do for businesses and business owners.
That's very different to a lot of other AI, I wouldn't even call them startups, but AI technologies that are in market at the moment, where they're trying to be flashy and innovative, but it sounds like you're almost trying to solve old problems with new tech. Is that fair?
We are absolutely doing that. We have created, like some of Decidr's technology is what we call an agentic schema. So, the X for Y would be like we're the Palantir for SMEs. So Palantir is creating an ontology for government, right? We've created like a schema for a business, the whole thing, right? And each node in that is agentic. And we'll get into what agentic means, our interpretation of that. But yeah, absolutely. Where everyone is focused on point solutions, which I think personally is, being in the industry and working on, many of the large language models and knowing what it looks like underneath the hood of building these things. It's not surprising because, trends, we all do the same things as humans over and over again. And, we're the tailwinds of SaaS and VC investment in SaaS are strong. So it's not surprising that we're taking this inhuman technology and putting it into very human businesses. That's like, bricks and mortars to online. Like when websites were first created, you don't like literally have the same walkthrough as a David Jones or a Walmart, or even worse, you then take the terminal and you put it into the Walmart. So you have people going, like, that's kind of what we're doing now when we're jamming these point solutions into human businesses, where we believe you need to, like any new technology, you need to build an AI first or an agentic first system and then have humans to go into it. And that's what Decidr's about. And you're absolutely right. It's a little bit boring in the sense that we actually manufacture businesses. That's where we manufacture agentic businesses, and everyone comes out looking exactly the same. And then you tune it, and based on your higher order or your very human, which is taste, timing, tacit knowledge, your way, right? The je ne sais quoi of how you do things in the world. But if every business has the same foundations, that's when it gets really cool because they're all networked, they're all nested. There's a whole bunch of economic and other transactional benefits that come from the technology. But that, like what we're all about here at Decidr, and I started with the Camry engine, which is kind of funny, but the Camrys are everywhere. That's a good thing. But we want to build the agentic economy. Yeah. And the agentic economy is where these agentic businesses transact between them. Like they're actually, when we create them, they're all already networked. And so what does that mean for humans? Like, it means that you have prospects immediately in your agentic business. You don't have to search for prospects anymore. You have vendor recommendations. You have these things.
Before we unpack agentic and we go down that path, which I'm really keen to do, talk us through the foundation model. So if we kind of bring it back to those basic systems or those operating systems within a business, especially for e-commerce businesses, one of the things that I understand about Decidr is that you pull together all the platforms that hold the data to allow you to make decisions. What are the common platforms that you see come together, especially for e-commerce SMEs?
Yeah, so I think what we look to is, Zapier or the most popular connectors out there. Pretty much the top 20 in Zapier are the top 20 most popular apps or SaaS platforms and businesses. So they're already out there, and there's hyper successful SaaS companies. So Shopify to Google Workspace to Xero to Salesforce to, everybody would know the list, right?
Yeah.
That, with an e-commerce company. And those are the ones that we bring together. And like different from point solutions or what we call vertical AI, Decidr is a horizontal platform. And what I like to always give the example of is, all of us have used ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude before. And when we put in a small prompt versus you put in a big prompt, you get a better result with a big prompt, right? No one's going to argue that. So that's context, right? That's the context window. And so AI is fundamentally a horizontal technology. So what we're doing is we're bringing all the horizontal data of a business, and I'm going to simplify it. We don't chuck it into a prompt window, but it's the same type of logic. If when you give an instruction, but it has the entire context of your business, the instruction is much more valuable. It's it's accuracy versus precision that comes out of it. So, that's the fundamental difference between like Decidr and many of these point solutions. But again, to answer your question, we connect with most, and there's lots of API integrators out there. So every month we're adding more and more integrations to our platform.
And is it cross-referencing and checking for accuracy across those platforms?
Yeah, that's the cool part. So as part of our schema, so I talked about that agentic schema. So if you think about a customer, right, and you have a Xero, which is your accounting platform, and you have Shopify, right? If you think about the customer name, which one do you want to take? You want to take your Xero one, right? And so our system creates a single source record for every customer, every product, every vendor, and our system. And again, humans are involved with it. Agentic means humans and generative AI and conditional logic in our world. And so you go through that. We have a very interesting evaluation method that happens at every single cell in the system. And so kind of an outcome is with Decidr, you get an agentically managed database. So, and it extends the database. So it adds more columns, and it can do things like, it's quite cool. So it can look between the nodes. So our nodes talk to each other. So Xero nodes talk to Shopify nodes. It can go into the horizontal data because it could find a proposal, right? Or an abandoned cart. It could go into the large language models, of which we use all of them, and it could find whatever's in there. It can go out onto the web and find public data, or it could go to the human who put the record in because it has metadata. So we know who is the owner of the record. And so imagine that going through scheduling, that using kind of Gen AI at the right points, not all points, but at the right points. Then you get this essentially it creates an agentic single source database for you. And it's constantly managed, which is pretty exciting. And that's really why our agentic apps that sit on top of them are so smart out of the box. It's it has perfect data to traverse all the time.
Yeah. And tell us more about those agentic apps. So how do they work? So I assume that I'm running an e-commerce business. What are the most common agentic uses that you find that sit on top of that data?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we cross the entire business spectrum. So from front-end sales all the way through bank reconciliations. I'd say our e-com customers, the natural first place to start is the front end and with customers. And those were some of our first deployments, right, with e-com companies where I think the Luddite would call them a chatbot. I don't like calling them a chat. We call them like sales apps or agentic sales apps, but they manifest in a chat style or a natural language interface. And today, most of the chatbots or what's called AI agents that exist on websites, they're principally task-based. So they have to follow an orchestration flow, right? Which a human has to put together. And there's these big trees of like branching. Ours is not that because it sits on the agentic database. What we're about is goal engineering. So there's no prompting or engineering with our apps. What they just are is you give them a goal. So one app for an e-com company, we said we want it to grow revenue by 20% over 12 months time. That's the only goal. That's the only thing we told this thing. And because it can see across the entire horizontal stack, and that's 3PL, that's Klaviyo, that's Google Ads, that's Meta, the e-com stack.
The growth stack?
Yeah, the growth stack. Within 8 weeks, it grew incremental revenue by 5%. And after 12 weeks, it's nearly 10%. Like the agentic sales app converts at 10 times higher than the website.
What kind of things is it picking up?
Well, I think so. It knows the products better than any human. It knows the ingredients in the products. It knows every competitor, all of their ingredients, all of their products. It has nuance, like because it has, the company's marketing documents and their vision documents, and it has nuance. It has all the LLMs ability and grasp of language. It knows stock levels from the 3PL, right? It knows if a prospect who's on site looks like another prospect who is more likely to convert or less likely to convert. So those are all the really cool technical things. But the other non-technical things are it's available 24 hours a day. You can transact within the chat, right? It speaks 36 languages. It remembers you. So there's just some basic stuff. I mean, I think we've all been on some sort of support call with a telco, and the telcos, they're throwing it out in the world that they have domestic humans who are managing those support queries. I feel sorry for those people. They're like handling 10 concurrent chats. You ask them about like your router, which you got 5 years ago, and what's wrong with it. And you can tell that they're just like, that's a painful. I'd rather just talk to this thing that's smart, that's read all the manuals for my router.
Well, when you think about e-commerce, like the majority of customer service queries is where's my order? And I'm assuming that Decidr is hooked up to a shipping platform as well as a e-com platform to be able to pull that information pretty easily. That would be bread and butter.
Correct. Where's my order? You get a result snappy right away, right? And then there's service which comes from it. It's like, oh, would you like me to, if it hasn't arrived by the deadline, would you like me to notify you? Yes. It already knows your email, right? It knows your phone number to text you. It knows all these things, right? And remember, that's just a natural language interface. No one had to orchestrate anything in the system for that, what we call agentic flow, now to be deployed to that particular customer. So, we went from bricks and mortars, from human-led full service to online, which was self-service. And we're going back to AI full service, agentic full service. And so like e-com as well, like we have some stuff coming out later in the year where as you are chatting, the entire website is refactoring based on your chat, who you are, and even your profile and the product descriptions may be written differently for you in real time based on, it could be your demos, it could be your personas, it could be whatever is the system believes is going to achieve that goal, which you've instructed your system to do.
So you're bleeding across a few technology players in the e-commerce space there to steal their lunch.
Yes.
Unapologetically.
Yeah, well, I think like if we take a minute to talk about the point solutions out there, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple very clear mathematical issues that I would love to talk about. Then there's the actual kind of how a business needs to use these things. Like I'm a sales leader, I've been a CEO, I've done all the jobs, right? And the stack that you have to put into e-commerce is bananas, right? How many layers, how many point solutions that you need to put in, and how much wiring you need, and how much, data reconciliation, all that stuff. It's a lot. So that's pain. The second thing is when you start to look at these point solutions, there's a few things I like to point out, right? Number one is, remember 10 years ago when Ubers were really cheap? It was a great time, wasn't it?
And they were clean.
$4. Yeah, they were clean. They weren't all Toyota Camrys.
Nothing wrong with a Toyota Camry, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sponsored by Toyota, although I should be. I mean, I talk about it all the time. So, why were they cheap? They were subsidized by venture capital, right? And fast forward 10 years when Uber was like, we're going to have a profit. it was like I don't know how much, 6 times, 8 times. It's so much more expensive than it was, right?
Yeah.
I took a Waymo when I was in San Francisco, and it was like $9 to get from Pier 19 through to the city. And I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, boy, this is not going to last. How many years till I have to pay, full rack?
And now they've set your standards on what it should be. And you're like, anything below that is like, oh, I've got to take one of them.
Yeah, exactly. But so venture capital subsidized Uber so that we download the apps, we build the habit, right? And they get surface area. Tokens are heavily subsidized today. So that's number one, right? Number two is when you use a point solution, and many of them are just fine-tuned. They're fine-tuning the models, right? A generative AI. So they're almost pure Gen AI going through. And so, Gen AI is relatively unreliable. And what does that mean? So if you put a prompt in 5 different times, you're going to get 5 different results, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have a workflow and you have a 95% reliability rate on each step, right? After 20 steps, that's a 40%, 36% reliability rate. So that doesn't work for business, right? You need 99% reliability per step. And so even at 99% reliability, after 20 steps, that's only 80%, 83%. And so these point solutions are fine tuning, and some of them are quite good. But when it comes to enterprise grade, the reliability goes down. So that's number one. And number two is the mathematical problem, which is big prompts are better, right? Get better results. Well, the longer the conversation, and when I say conversation, that's also tasks in a workflow, is it has to bring the memory from each previous task into the next one. And many people, when they say, oh, I just want to upload a customer record into my CRM, our human brains go, oh, that's 4 steps. No, like the heuristics in our brain are doing a lot of other things that you need to do multiple steps for a process, right? And so it's not unreasonable to have 100 steps, little tiny steps that go into just doing that. If you do 10 steps, it'll cost you 10 cents. If you do 50 steps, it'll cost you $2.50. If you do 100 steps, it costs you $100. So there's a quadratic increase in token cost because of prompt chaining and token nesting that goes into it. And so I think where in the future, you get the push of like VC subsidization going away, and you get prompt chaining. So naturally, workflows become more complex. Many of these point solutions, their business models actually won't work. So we'll go through a similar phase that we went through like 20, 15 years ago. It's like whole explosion of all of these point solutions. There'll be consolidation. There'll be consolidation groups, and then kind of it all shake out. But again, the bet that we're making is not model native AI, which is what I just explained, but system native AI, which is AI as infrastructure, or build your AI infrastructure first, then figure out what points, what junctions do you want to have a generative AI working.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I actually wrote about this in our newsletter a few weeks ago, and I got mixed responses around, imagine if your GPT, and taking it to the most basic level, your chat GPT addiction now costs you $30 a month, whatever it is. If it's $300, you're still going to pay it? Most of us have to, because we can't work without it now. If it's $3,000, is that still worth it? Because it's going to happen. Yes. I'm not sure it would be that extreme, but it's not going to stay the same as what it is now. One of the things that I found really interesting there with how you've set up Decidr is around the goal-oriented approach rather than a task-oriented approach. If we go back to that customer service perspective there around using it as an agentic customer service support, obviously customer service can be, hey, do this as efficiently as possible for our team. Run it quick, run it fast, don't spend much time. It could be actually give the customer the best experience ever. Go over the top, go above and beyond exactly those points that you said. Do follow-ups, do all this sort of stuff that will cost slightly more, maybe take longer. Or there's also the option of, actually, we want you to solve the problem, but then also upsell and be a sales machine as well. When you are approaching something like customer service with Decidr, how do you set a goal when you've got so many different options available to you? You know what I mean? Like, how would you set that up?
So you have to look at now a goal hierarchy within the organization. So at the very top, you have aspirations, right? As a business, right? You have aspirations, you have your vision, you have your values. These are all like higher order goals that you set. Now, underneath in the system, so you have to think about some of the things that are going on in our system at all times. So we have our schema, so everything is uniform and standardized. You have our agentic database, so everything is complete and expanding. So those things are now there, data lakes and the promise that's actually happens in our system. Now, as you're setting and you're installing what we call agentic apps in the organization, each app, which has a series of workflows, they all have goals, right? And so when I give you an example of, we want to achieve $20 million in revenue this year, if that's a goal for an e-commerce company, that's not a goal. That's an outcome of many goals that sit underneath, right? And so we have to, when we think about customers, so you get a great example of like, well, this customer we want to upsell, right? Now, we're thinking using our human brains to think about how to do that in personas. In a system, AI has perfect memory, it can see everything simultaneously. And from an agentic perspective, it will figure out the best way because it understands all the goals that cascade all the way up, right? And it will figure out what is the best way to do that.
So they're not standalone goals.
Yes, sometimes it may mean to upsell. Sometimes it may mean to send to a human customer service to give them the white glove treatment. Sometimes it will be do nothing. And so if you have 100,000 customers, you may have 100,000 unique experiences that happen in there. And so in our system, goal engineering, and that doesn't mean you have to set a goal for every field in our system. That's not many come with pre-installed goals, but there are inputs in the system which change the goals. So if I use an example of if the keyword groups that you're buying are increased by 20%, the cost goes up by 20%, like our system will push decisions. That's why it's called Decidr. It pushes decisions to you and it says your strategy cannot be achieved for your goals and aspirations because it's 20% more expensive. Here are different ways that you can achieve the goals. It might take longer, right? You might have to increase your AOV. You might have to do a discount, and then you choose the strategy that now the system's changed. And so I like to think, because I'm a Mac owner, remember the old time machine and you see like all the cuts of all your saves? That's kind of like what our system will give you. It's like, here are all the futures that you could potentially choose. You can only choose one at the moment. Choose that one and then go ahead. And an option for that 20% would be, do you have an extra N dollars that will allow us to pay more, right? Yeah. That's a choice that you can make, right? Which is, I want to achieve my quantity, but I'll take a hit on my margin.
I mean, that's essentially the role of a head of e-commerce or a senior e-commerce manager when you're answering into senior management is to give those options and those potential outcomes, right?
Yes.
Do you see it as a sidekick to those roles, or do you see it as a replacement to those roles?
Well, I think it'll be a social media manager didn't exist 14 years ago, right? That, the people who did really well at EDMs, they probably still did really well in social, right? It was just another pathway to do that. So, I think some jobs will go away. Yes, absolutely. That'd be silly to say otherwise. Do I think that many jobs will evolve? Absolutely. Do I think many people will be exposed? I do. So, that creates what's interesting is like this AI is potentially an amazing equalizer. And what I mean by that is the best, right? The best of whatever you are. So I don't know about you, but there's always one person in the organization who's like amazing at customer service. And it doesn't matter if like the person's foot got chopped off, they'll still get, they'll still buy Bose shoes, right? But that's their business, right? And now they can hyperscale themselves and their je ne sais quoi, and they become a specialist. And you install, as a business, the person who I'm thinking about, her name was Christy. I would install Christy in thousands of businesses, right?
Yeah.
Into that. So I think the best e-com managers who just, have that je ne sais quoi, have that like taste, that ability to pick the thing, they'll be superstars.
It's also an interesting thing from a business perspective is that if you do have those superstars, and say you have them in your business for 2-3 years, because superstars don't last forever. They're usually, if they're that good, they're getting poached pretty quickly. But if you do have them for a good 2 or 3 years, you bake their process and their little magic into the system that can live on, long after they're gone, right?
Yeah. We are, another way to think about Decidr is like, we are doing what to knowledge work, what manufacturing did to products, right? You manufacture knowledge work in our system. And so what you're saying, you just said it in another way, but you define what your amazing workflow is. And then, that's the Nathan Bush workflow for podcasting. And that's the best in the world.
No one wants that. It's not that professional.
Anyone who's had a personal trainer knows that whatever targets you set them, they're going to raise them. So when Nutrition Warehouse looked to engage Klaviyo, it wasn't just about sending emails effectively. They tasked them with increasing revenue, driving awareness, and building customer lifetime value. It's a spicy set. But Klaviyo, they were up for the challenge. By creating the right email flows triggered by customer actions, using geo-targeting for their 110 stores, and using predictive analytics, they proved that they were up for the challenge. Smashed it, in fact. With a 47% year-on-year increase in placed order rate on email flows and a Klaviyo ROI of 50 times, Nutrition Warehouse remain ahead of the pack. To explore how Klaviyo can grow your e-commerce business and see more case studies, visit klaviyo.com/au.
I'm really interested because you did some research that you released recently around Decidr's AI Readiness Index. And one of the stats that came out of there is that you found that 57% of businesses are prioritizing efficiency and 25% are prioritizing growth with AI. Seems out of whack. Why are we leaning towards efficiency rather than growth when we have these amazing new tools available?
Well, let me start by saying that I am an Australian citizen, so I can have a moan about Aussies just as easily as I can about Canadians. Aussies, we are, as a country, very parochial and we're very risk adverse. So surprise, surprise, right? Efficiency pops up on top of the list and productivity is at the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. We live in this great country and we have this, it's both, I call it like the tyranny of distance when it comes to commercial activities, but is it a blessing of distance when it comes to, living here as a citizen. And so because of this distance, we only as Australians think of our own country and the business that we can do in our own country. And so as a consequence, the deal flow is not that high, which means that the perceived risk is higher, which means that decision-making is slower, which means that you have I believe, a kind of a risk aversion first mindset. So I'm not surprised. I think it's a reflection of the Aussie commercial, mind.
Could have saved thousands of dollars by not doing the research and just going on your gut feel.
Yeah, maybe. Hindsight's 2020. But I think it's a sobering report, right? If anyone wants to have a look at it when it comes to artificial intelligence. So if you do believe, as one of the listeners, if you do believe that AI will change the world, doesn't matter in which way or how you think, but if you think it's going to change the world, there's going to be really two types of nations. There'll be AI consumers and there'll be AI creators. And I think that in its current form, Australia will be tragically an AI consumer. And when you think about, again, if anyone's picking up on this, this concept of the agentic economy, which I threw out before, which is feels a bit buzzwordy, but it is an economy enabled by artificial intelligence transactions. I think that's definitely happening, whether it's Decidr or somebody else. But if you place that competes against a human native economy, I know which one's going to win just based on, if you look at the stock market, right? You look at, electronic trading versus paper trading, right? Obviously, we all know which one is better when it comes to that. So it's a sobering report. I'm excited to do the next round. So we'll do it at least twice a year. I'd like to, AI model development moves pretty quickly. So we might do it even more than that. But I'd be curious, 3 data points can indicate a trend. So I'm excited for our third index to come out so we can hopefully see that Aussies are a bit more focused on what they could be getting globally, right? Yeah. As opposed to kind of what's happening in Melbourne surrounds or Sydney surrounds or out of Brisbane, Vegas.
I'm really interested in what you said there around the two types of economies going on and the agentic economy. Can you just paint a picture for us? What does an economy that is running as an agentic economy look like? 1 or 2 examples compared to an economy that's not. What's your vision for that?
Well, I think without just getting too much in the detail, describing the mechanism, maybe it's what are the benefits that come out of these economies, right? And so if you think about what AI is proposed to unlock here in kind of Asia, in the world is about 15 trillion worth of additional value. And if you look at GDP over the next kind of 10 years, that's estimated to be around 15%. So, and that's not linear, right? So if we take a 10-year view, it will probably be parabolic in the way it kind of moves. But if you're looking at GDP growth anywhere north of 2%, you are like a rocket ship, right? Of productivity and GDP. So what does that translate into? Well, that translates into a higher tax base. It translates into more positive trade deficits. It translates into all of these really powerful things that make the sovereign nation a really attractive place to live, which in turn brings more people in, et cetera, et cetera. So, and elevates the type of work. So it's this a sovereign nation that has an agentic economy, I believe, will have higher life and quality of life satisfaction with its citizens. A country that does not, it'll be slow at first and then scary fast, because the drain that will happen out of that kind of non-agentic sovereign nation. Like, I think the world will move into like AI haves and AI have-nots, to be honest. And like, what does that mean for their education system? What does it mean for multi-generational wealth? Like, there's a whole bunch of impacts that can come out of it, but I think it's inevitable coming. It's just how federal governments really start preparing for it.
And obviously you are deep in the weeds in developing an AI solution and rolling that out globally. Do you think, in terms of growth and being one of those nations that is able to move forward and being in the category that is AI enabled, do we actually have to lead in developing the technology, or is it more around businesses adapting and using technology regardless of where it comes from?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Nathan. I think the federal government and state governments need to really move into how to equip, especially small businesses in particular, with this type of technology or this type of thinking. And the reason why is because it's agentic, because it's goal-seek and networked, it actually feeds on itself. So if you are an agentic business, you want your suppliers to have your platform. So it's very value chain based, right? Which is part of the reason
You can't be out there using AI all by yourself. You actually need the network of people using it to actually make it efficient.
Correct. But the network looks for the network, right? It wants to find other ones, and it will preference other agentic organizations before human ones because of speed, because of cost, because of reliability, right? And it does that at an inhuman speed, right? So, just like at the stock market, like it's been proven that there are micro crashes that happen within milliseconds in trading windows, right? Because of these big algorithmic trading platforms are just trading at so fast that no human could even see it. They have to get a research scientist to look within a second and go, oh, wow, there's like a crash. We didn't even know, but here we are, right? So, but yeah, I think it's a federal initiative. And, the federal government today, like just this past week, there's been all this talk about copyright. I mean, I wrote an opinion piece and that popped up in Capital Brief. And, my view is like, yes, copyright is important. Like, I don't want to diminish the impact of original work, but that's not really the problem. The problem is productivity. And how do we equip, to your good question, was like, how do we equip businesses to look towards productivity? Because the data, at least the coming out of our index, suggests that they are not, right? And, what happens to risk-adverse people? Like, we're not preppers. We're not, building economic bunkers stocked with canned beans and Tui's New. But so we got to do something.
You're a good prepper putting Tui's New in there.
Yeah. Phoebe, I don't know. It depends on... Tui's old. That's what I'd like. I'd put it down there.
Especially if you don't have a fridge plugged in. You'll go old, not... Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you have much hope? Do you have much optimism that the private sector is going to get support from the Australian government around growth using AI? Or do you see the government sticking to more of a protectionism role?
It's a good question. Without getting too political, I think that, over the past 5 years or so, there's been a real keen focus on sustainability in this, as a national talk track and a national focus there. I mean, amongst other things. Australia doesn't have a great track record for enabling businesses and kind of getting behind businesses as compared to other economies. So I would say I would be worried about, the government's ability to effectively engage businesses. Yeah.
So don't hope the government's going to save you. It's essentially up to businesses, especially SMEs, to forge their own path here.
It is, and I look to, you hear things or you read things like in the UAE, every single citizen is getting a license to ChatGPT, right? Now, oil money can allow you to do those things. However, right, it's not that much money. If you've got, how many citizens does Australia have? Like 30 million people? Let's cut it in half to the working population. 15 million people. Those are types of initiatives. Whether or not it's the right one or the wrong one, I don't think that really matters, but it demonstrates that the government recognizes the potential impact of this, and it's finding ways to equip. I think that's the important word, equip citizens in this case, or businesses and others, to be able to, go through the step, the very human steps, which is totally okay, which is like be exposed, learn, understand, apply.
The market is shifting. Costs are climbing and the pressure to do more with less is very real. But when resources are tight, you can rely on Shopify, the platform that's consistently first with new capabilities. Shopify invests significantly in R&D and drops more than 150 updates every year, evolving with you and absorbing complexity so that you can focus on what moves your business forward. From AI-powered insights to the world's best converting checkout, Shopify is designed for the next era of commerce, helping you sell more, scale faster, and future-proof your brand. Build for what is next with Shopify. Visit Shopify for Enterprise to learn more.
Well, that's really interesting you say that, because if it is up to businesses, we need to be very deliberate around our decision making. So if we're choosing not to partake, it needs to be a deliberate decision rather than ostrich in the sand kind of behavior. Your research showed that 3/4 of SMEs in Australia actually don't have an AI roadmap. And I think given our conversation earlier around heads of e-commerce and senior e-commerce managers with tools like Decidr, who might be laying out pathways for leadership in growth options or efficiency options, which is essentially their job, it's never going to be more important for leaders in e-commerce to be able to own that roadmap, whether it, and have AI tools alongside them to have confidence in that roadmap. When you look at what an AI roadmap might look like for an e-commerce business, how detailed and laid out do you think that needs to be for an SME e-commerce business, given the uncertainty and the continual change in AI currently?
Yeah. Maybe just starting at the stat which you threw out, which was correct, but I'd add one more layer, which is we asked the question of everyone, what tools actually comprise your AI, tool set? And 9 out of 10, it was just ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot. So let's also be honest, of that 25%, they're really not deep practitioners of AI, right? Of AI tools.
And probably a lot of them are being used under personal accounts because it goes against company policy.
Probably. Yeah, probably. To your question is like, what does it look like for an SME? I would go to number one is the people who create the roadmaps now. They're the ones that are most likely to be adopted because there's literally a vacuum of AI roadmaps. So might as well be first, even if it's not right when you first start. So there's tip number one. Like observation number two or comment number two would be, where do you start? I would be sketching out on paper, if you want, a system map, right, of your business. Right? I would start there. And I would, underneath each system that you have, put like, what record do you want? For Shopify, it has customer records, it has transaction records, right? It has product records.
Xero.
Yeah. So I'd be looking at that and then going, okay, wait a second. Now take my labor, which if you're an SME, you don't have that many people in your organization typically, and say like, what do people do? Mm-hmm. How much do they spend in each one of these systems, tippy-tapping stuff into it, right? And then number three is ask yourself the question is like, if I had 10 times more employees, what would I do? Now, that's not to hire 10 times more, but that's like, what would you be focused on? That's the benefit of this amazing technology is that you can literally have an enterprise grade ability, right? Now into your business. So it forces that kind of thought process to say, okay, well, where's my tippy-tapping labor going into these systems, of which there's usually a lot when it comes to e-commerce companies. And then, well, what would it look like? What would my business look like if I had 10 times the amount of people? And then you're saying, well, where is that tippy-tapping going? Because how many of the extra people would I put as tippy-tappers, right? Into, creating campaigns in HubSpot. And so you don't have to do those things. Well, that's where I should probably focus on my AI.
And that's a pretty disruptive thought, isn't it? Because most e-commerce managers are asking their teams to do more with less or more with the same. And we've kind of got used to that ingrained thinking of like, how do I just make my team do more and get better results with what we've got? We know the boundaries there. There's not too many e-commerce businesses that are going, okay, if you triple your team tomorrow, what could you achieve? Yeah, that's interesting. If you could get rid of the tippy tappers at hotel check-ins, that'd be great. It feels like they write a novel every time you check in. I'm like, surely.
What are they tapping in?
Yeah, exactly. Tell me more around Decidr in terms of setup and commercials, what you can share here. So if people are hearing this and liking the sound of it and going, hey, I'd like to explore setting goals for different agents to help me uncover new insights. We know we've got systems with some great data in it, but we've never been able to bring them together. What does it look like from a moment customer puts their hand up and goes, we're keen to jump on board? What does it look like from a timeline, technical and commercial perspective?
Yeah. So, I'll put a couple caveats around this. So, like, if you're an e-com company that has many of the most popular SaaS tools out there, if you have proprietary tools or older systems that may extend the time to connect into our system. But if you're a couple things, one is we're launching our platform called Decidr.AI in beta. That's in October. So we only have a couple hundred slots that we're launching with. So you can just go to Decidr.AI and you pay $99 and you get into the preview slot, which is good. And so what it looks like is you put in your URL. That's where you start. And then our system, that seeds our system, right? And our system then starts building your AI org in real time. It goes out onto the web. It finds all the public data that's available. So if you're a service business, it calls it clients. If you're an e-com customer, it calls you customers. If you're a healthcare company, it calls it patients. Like, it does all those configs automatically. It looks at all your products. It categorizes all your products. And if, many businesses, e-coms have tons and tons of variants. Like, every color is a variant. Every t-shirt size is a variant. And so it builds all of that architecture in the background, right, against our standardized schema. And we call that pre-boarding. So as you're pre-boarded, you kind of get a view and you'll probably go like, wow, okay, that's probably better laid out than I've ever seen it before. And then you start integrating or syncing your systems. And that is very light touch. So in some cases, it's a one button push like Google Workspace, right? Connect your Google account. With Shopify, it's like get your API key, you load it in, and then it syncs, and Salesforce and things like that. As you add more, that syncs the data. And that starts preparing now the agentic single source, or what we call the Decidr record of your data. Once you're in there, as part of your onboarding now, you're going to be asked questions in a natural language format about your goals and aspirations. That starts way at the top, which, can be really fast if you know them, or can be very hard questions because people are like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. What are my aspirations, right? What is the true value proposition of my product to my customers? And how would I describe my best customer? So actually what will come out of it is, many of the couple onboarding questions may be like, you may have to skip them because you're like, I got to come back to this, or I got to go to the ChatGPT and actually.
I was about to say, you have a second screen with ChatGPT open to give you the answer.
Perhaps. So you go through that onboarding, and at that point, through your pre-boarding and onboarding, that then opens up what we call agentic apps. And so there's an apps marketplace that are available, and there'll be dozens in there. And an app is typically, it's not a big thing. It's typically a small thing or workflow. So that online sales app that I talked about earlier, that's actually a collection of a number of different workflows, right? So that would have like order checking, it would have in-cart transactions, it would have a thing. And you link all those together, and that becomes an experience for a customer. And again, those are all just, press the button and activate those apps. And if you want, you can go into the apps and you can see the workflows, and you can go, oh, our way does it this way, right? Instead of like ABC, we go ACB, right? In that particular workflow. And so with the first preview customers, that's what it will look like. As our ecosystem begins to grow, every app is actually a business. Like, they are an agentic organization. And so there'll be different versions of the same thing. So I use the example of like LinkedIn enrichment. So if you're a B2B business, you can sync all your contact records in, and some of them will have LinkedIn URLs, some won't. And so there's an agentic workflow called LinkedIn enrichment, which adds a few columns, right? Which costs 5 agentic workflows per row, right? And so run, all right? And it'll run only the ones it needs to, and it will add those columns, right? And you would only add them if you see value. Now, that from Decidr might cost 5 agentic workflows, right? And it's all done by AI or our system. You may create the Nathan Bush LinkedIn enrichment, and you look at every single one of them as a human to make sure that they're accurate, right? And you will charge $5 every one that puts in, but it's verified by a human. And so there'll be this kind of expanding marketplace, just like on your iPhone or Google Play, where you'll be able to choose, right? What has in like the best agentic apps will win. Now, the cool part is because of our schema, because every app is also a business. When you create your app, the Nathan Bush LinkedIn enrichment app, it automatically knows how many blank LinkedIn records are in the entire system. And it will say like your target market in the Decidr ecosystem is 14 million records, right? And you're going to charge $5 for 14 million. That's a big number, but you're probably not going to get all those ones. And your AI org will send proposals automatically to those other businesses. And then you'll have your strategy for your business. And you'll say, I want to get, these are my goals, these are my aspirations. And it will say, well, $5, it might be a bit too much, right? So if you want to put it at 15 cents, you'll do 1 million rows a month. And then you're
And
like, oh,
in that, I know this is just one example. We've kind of gone down the rabbit hole a little bit there. But in that example, say you're LinkedIn, right? And you're responding to this new world. Is LinkedIn going to start charging you for access to that data?
probably. Yep. I mean, we're already seeing it with Reddit and New York Times and stuff like that. So, and I think LinkedIn has a right to do that. And I'll tell you why, right? So I think what the agentic economy is going to bring, right, it's going to remove information asymmetry. There are copies of me and you in hundreds or thousands of CRM systems, right? That's the asymmetry, right? Some have good data on you or me, some have poor data on you or me, right? The future, there is one you, right? And systems go into the you, right, to access that information. Now, LinkedIn has a great product. They spent lots of money, of which we volunteer. We volunteer all of our important information.
We've helped build that. Yep.
So they might have the ability to charge for it. Now, a CRM system like Salesforce, no way, right? That's like Swiss cheese. At least to start, like a real estate domain, yes. So I always look for what I call like an immutable record. So that would be a house address, that would be a tax record, that would be
email. Google would have it.
Some, yep. Not all.
Not all. Yep.
So, because an email address that's not really immutable, like, and you can have multiple email addresses. There's not just like one for you.
Yep.
Social, kind of the same. There's many people have many social accounts. Meta's kind of doing it with Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp. That's kind of a mutable ID across it.
Okay. So you see a big battle for the ownership of the one true record.
Yeah, there will be. I mean, there's a piece of information that came up from Cloudflare just recently, which was like 10 years ago, the number of pages consumed per search query was like, it was for every query, one query, there was 2 pages crawled, right? Then go kind of 10 years later, it was 1 to 300. Today, Anthropic, it is 1 for every crawl. There are 60,000 pages crawled. So like the nature of the web is fundamentally changing. So it actually might get locked down. You never know. Like, it might get locked down and like gated everywhere just because these like the current like model makers are just scouring the web. And also there's so much more information being created, which kind of goes back to the copyright thing that came up earlier, which is, I think we'll start to revalue original content, but that's based on the removal of this information asymmetry. So when there's only one journalist who has a wonderful reputation and who has a unique take on the world, is the systems will then go into that and they'll have incredible value because of their audiences. Like that's a product, right? Just as it would be like a face cream or Camry engine.
Yes, we're back at Camry. Now, there is a really great case study on your site. We didn't even get to talk about properly edible beauty if people want to see how it all comes together for an e-commerce business, because I know sometimes it's better when you get a practical or a real business in front of you and you see it. So I think that's a great one. We'll put a link to that in the show notes and a link to the site as well in case people want to have a click around and see if they can spot where the agentic is playing its role. But for you, David, what's the next 12 months hold? Where's your priorities for yourself and the team at Decidr?
Sure. So we're launching our beta in October. And, that's the big release of our platform. So we're 5 million % focused on that currently. Once we launch it, I think there's 3 things that we're focused on. Thing number 1 is what are the agentic flows and what are the apps that everybody wants? And what's cool about our system, it's no code. So we can build them and we use our system. Like we're consumers of our own technology. So we every day find new gaps of like, oh, we should make that an app. We should make that a workflow, so on and so forth. So I'm really excited for the agility to come out of our platform and for value to emerge, right? As this thing gets put out into the world and kind of starts agentically living, so to speak. That'd be number 1. Number 2 is to continue our partnership strategy as a business. We embed our technology in many of the biggest SaaS companies and cloud providers around the world. So we build their agentic apps for them. But the cool part is like that's an agentic app, but every one of our partners' customers, they get our whole platform. Like whether they know it or not, they get the whole platform. So there's this great kind of cross-selling ability that comes out of it. So to really support our partners and to add more partners into our business.
What kind of partners are you looking for in particular?
So again, going back to that immutable record kind of comment I made before, a website is an immutable record. Hosting, website at all. Accounting partner, real estate.
Yep.
We have those few to name off the top. And, coinciding with that is then, our international expansion. So, we started it over in the States and it's now, they have 32 million businesses already in the US. That's a lot of businesses to look at. And because we're a horizontal platform, we're sector agnostic. So it's then like, that's the exciting part, which is like, oh, we have this ability to have a network system out of the box that is pre-boarding and that as a no-code platform to build apps. I'm excited for when companies are building apps that we've never even thought about before in specialized areas, right? And that's when I know that our business is really starting to cook, where there's a specialist accounting or bank reconciliation workflow for plumbing companies. I'm like, I know when we made it, when the plumbers, right, are...
When they're bringing new ideas.
Yes,
I love it. David, thank you so much. You've blown my mind on a lot of things that I've never thought about from an AI perspective. And I especially love the focus on growth and productivity rather than efficiencies. I think we get hung up on AI as a replacement rather than a growth engine. So thank you for that. Even as you're speaking, then I'm like, it's going to achieve your third goal in your career, isn't it? You're going to be able to travel wherever you want with this thing. As soon as businesses get a taste of it, you're going to be flying all over the world.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for joining us on Add to Cart today.
Thanks, Nathan.
I really enjoyed that chat with David. It's not often that we get into politics on Add to Cart, but I think that was a really welcome conversation, one that we need to have around AI, because businesses aren't sure exactly on where it's going to fall in terms of government support. What I got out of that is that you do have a choice, even if you're not participating in AI or you choose to be cautious. That in itself is a strategic business choice. So, 3 lessons that I took out of that chat with David. Number 1, create an AI roadmap. And David gave some really great ideas on how to do that, from starting to sketch out your systems, so mapping together all the technology that you use and all the sources of truth for your data, understanding what data it's holding and who's using those systems. And I love that David called out the tippy tappers in our organization, because we know that they are not going to be jobs that are around in the future. Who knows how long it is, but if you're a tippy tapper, you should be worried. But as a manager, we've got to think about the resources available to us, and not only the resources available to us today, but what it will look like in an agentic world where it might be feasible to say, actually, your workforce is 10 times bigger, even though they're not physical people. How would you use this to set yourself up for growth and to achieve our organizational goals? That in itself is a big question. Number 2 is about setting agentic goals, not just tasks. This was a big reframe from David. So a lot of us, when we're using AI, are thinking about, how do I get it to achieve this task that I've always asked it to do? However, what if we approach it from a sense of, I'm doing this task to achieve this goal. What if I actually briefed the goal, not the task? And that's what Decidr sets out to do, to help businesses achieve those goals, regardless of what tasks are needed to achieve it. So by taking our thinking up a level into briefing for goals, not just tasks, it will unlock what AI can actually do for us. And the third thing that I took out of that conversation is, what doesn't change is that you still need to know the goals of your organization. We often talk around AI is only as good as the data that's behind it at the foundation. We talked a little bit about that today, but it's also about knowing the strategic direction of your organization and where you're heading. If you are not clear on that, if you cannot describe that to your manager, to your team, good luck describing it to an agent. Because at the end of the day, as systems like Decidr start rolling out, being able to articulate your strategic goals and outcomes that you want will be way more valuable than asking an AI agent to do a task. If you can't articulate your strategic goals today, make sure you go back and you get this right before you start unboxing new tools or new tech that may take you down the totally wrong path. If you enjoyed what you heard today, and if it stretched your thinking and made you think about things in a totally new way, then you're going to love our Add to Cart community. We talk a hell of a lot in there around AI for e-commerce, and there's some of the smartest people in Australia joining that community, over 500 e-commerce professionals. So come on in, discuss some of those themes and some of those ideas that we got out of today's episode with like-minded people. You can join for free over on addtocart.com.au. We'd love to see you in there. I'll see you again next week.